Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. This is Fujifilm's $1,800 flagship X-series camera. It's also deliberately designed to be slow and inconvenient. You see, you've got to fold the main screen out to even see it, and if you don't fold it back, it sticks out. A lot. On the other side of that hidden main screen is this little LCD that actually faces you most of the time. But this one's not even backlit, and it's not really for viewing images on either. At this point, you're either thinking this has to be one of the worst designs ever for a camera, or genuinely one of the best cameras ever made. You see, the X Pro 3 is a rangefinder camera, meaning the lens is here in the middle, but if you use the eyepiece, you're looking through a window here and not through the lens. And although the rangefinder itself is fully optical, it does have a really futuristic looking digital overlay. It almost looks science fiction-like. There's a frame line that gives you an approximation of your current lens's field of view, and that frame will actually move as you adjust your focus to compensate for parallax. But what's even cooler is this. You can pop this mini screen up in the corner of the rangefinder that shows you a live sensor preview of your focus point. It actually brings up physically a tiny display tucked away in the corner of the rangefinder. This allows you to check focus through the lens while looking through a rangefinder. But what if I told you there's also the option to completely replace the rangefinder with a fully electronic viewfinder at the flick of a switch? So don't be fooled by its looks. The very retro-looking X Pro 3 is actually packed with technology. However, I can totally understand if a skeptical photographer calls the X Pro 3 a gimmicky camera. Take this rear non-backlit display, for example. It's designed specifically to show what film simulation you're currently shooting on. Although there is the option to customize it into a generic secondary info display, where's the fun in that? It was clearly and fully intended to recreate the analog experience, where you would clip a piece of the box your film stock came in on the back of your camera, and what that shows you is just your film stock and what ISO it came in. Exactly the two pieces of information you'll find on the back of your X Pro 3. The shutter speed dial also looks like it was transplanted right off a film camera. There's a window within the dial that shows your ISO setting, and if you're like me who's got little to no experience with film cameras, you'll probably have a really hard time figuring out how to change the ISO setting in there. I myself couldn't figure it out to save my life until I asked Jace from Lens Library for help. And I'll be glad to show you how it's done, don't worry, but before I just go ahead and hand the answer out, if you're interested to try shooting actual film but don't know where to even start, there is a class on Skillshare that's perfect for beginners. It's called Film Photography, the Ins and Outs of Going Analog, taught by Antonio Castello. He takes you from selecting your camera and film all the way to developing and scanning it. But I really appreciate the parts where he explains the different sizes of film so you don't end up buying the wrong kind for your camera. And just in case you've never heard of our sponsor Skillshare, they are an online community home to thousands of inspiring classes. You'll find classes on film and video all the way to topics like marketing. All of them are made just for curious and creative people like ourselves. It's this platform built all around learning and exploring new skills, deepening existing passions, and for us to sometimes just get lost in creativity. If you go for the annual subscription, it's less than $10 a month, and being curated specifically for learning means there are no ads on the platform for you to stay focused. They're constantly launching new premium classes, and the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. So, the way you change your ISO on the X Pro 3 is you lift this ring around the dial, and that lets you rotate just the outer ring without the dial along with it, and that changes your ISO. Just like many film cameras. In fact, this whole camera is just like a film camera. I mean, just look at this thing. There is barely anything on it that looks digital. The branding and model tag is also just a small line of text on the top plate. So if you look directly from the front, there is no visible branding. Very stealthy and extremely stylish. Fuji has also elected to use titanium for both the top and bottom plates. This is the only Fuji camera to get a titanium finish, so they're really making a statement by using premium materials for their flagship here. But when you hold this flagship against a more conventional idea of what a flagship camera is, you've got one hell of a disparity. The X Pro 3 just appears like a camera that's completely unbothered by performance figures. It's just so laid back. But that's precisely where its charm comes from. After shooting with so many modern powerhouse cameras, the X Pro 3 is different in just the right ways and in just the right amounts to snap you out of that comfort zone and make photography exciting again. My favorite way to shoot with this camera is to use the optical rangefinder with image preview turned off. That way, when you fire the shutter, you hear it going off, but you don't know what the actual photo looks like. Very much the same experience as shooting on film, and when you want to check your shot, there's that magical few seconds of suspense as you press the playback button and slowly flip open your screen to see your results. It's an incredibly fun way to experience photography. Fujifilm themselves have even gone as far as coining the X Pro 3 the definition of pure photography. But that's certainly not to say there's any shortage of options for previewing your photos as you shoot. If you enable preview, it can bring up the EVF along with your freshly taken photo for just a moment before returning you to rangefinder mode. Or you can customize it to have the preview quite magically appear in the corner of your view momentarily. It is just a very pleasant experience shooting with the X Pro 3. That's where its value is. From the way the camera feels to the way you interact with it, down to the way the shutter sounds. You can tell they weren't gunning for flagship speed and performance. Fuji's calling it flagship for its shooting experience. It's also quite the flagship way to experience their film simulations. For me, I think it's the way this throws in an element of uncertainty and suspense into the mix, and that is what makes shooting with the X Pro 3 so much fun. If anything, I think the X Pro 3 is borderlining into the luxury camera market because you can even order this with a scratch-resistant Duratect coating on top of the standard titanium finish. That being said, I wouldn't for one second question the X Pro 3's ability to handle any serious work either. It's got very respectable autofocus performance, 11 frames per second continuous shooting in mechanical shutter mode, and if you need a what you see is what you get preview, you've always got the OLED EVF to take the place of the rangefinder. Heck, this has even got dual card slots. And did I mention that the screen is a touch screen as well? I think it's also important to say that all this talk is not an intention to shift the focus away from image quality or in any way compensate for it. The X Pro 3's got the same APS-C 26 megapixel X-Trans sensor as the X-T4, so rest assured it's your fault if the images look bad. And unusual as it may seem, the X Pro 3 can actually record video in DCI 4K up to 30p. You're watching footage straight out of the X Pro 3 right now, and it even lets you record in F-Log. And while all these images are proof that the X Pro 3 can put out some really decent video, I think Fuji was just being generous to put video mode in the X Pro 3. I'm saying that because it's clear as day the X Pro 3 was never intended to be a video camera. It is, after all, pure photography. For starters, video mode is well hidden away as an option under the drive mode menu. There's no mode dial or toggle switch to bring you there, and if you do mount this onto a tripod, or even go as far as attaching a base plate, you won't be able to flip your screen out beyond 90 degrees. And if you think you can solve that by hooking up an external monitor, you'll get hit with the final nail in the coffin. The X Pro 3 does not even have an HDMI output, which is why I think video mode on the X Pro 3 is really more like an Easter egg. It's like they included video abilities just so that nobody can make fun of their flagship for not being able to shoot video. Plus, don't you think it's just kind of weird and wrong to see a camera looking like this recording video? Imagine getting filmed by a camera that looks like it can shoot 36 frames on a single roll. Perhaps that further reinforces the fact that the X Pro 3 is a polarizing camera. Depending on who picks it up, it's either an overpriced, pretentious camera that's form over function, or it's the best camera you could ever wish for. There is rarely an opinion that's in between those two. Admittedly, I myself too thought the X Pro 3 sounded like a bit of a joke when I first heard about it, but after actually shooting with it, I'm a believer. This is one of my favorite cameras to date, without question. This would easily be one of my top picks for a camera to travel with, and it's also no mystery why this might appeal tremendously towards street photographers. So if there is anyone who's still skeptical about the X Pro 3, I ask that you reconsider once more after shooting with it. It is truly a rare occurrence to come across a modern camera with so much character. The only thing you wish Fujifilm could have done is shove a full-frame sensor in it.